Laurie Simmons. So Laurie Simmons is going back to an idea of still life where she is showing us these objects, but unlike Ewald or Andras, using them not as just like, symbolic objects separate from us as people. She's using the scale of the still life as a way to sort of enact a theatrical production in a way. So she's working with dolls and doll houses, which are traditionally sort of like a assigned female sphere, but also sort of infantilizing, right? They're like, for little girls, and so they're not of value, right? Finger quotes around all of this. And so she's taking this kind of rejected space and using it to construct these sort of like psychological dramas that are about, feminism, women in this domestic sphere, and some of this is coming out of her. I mean, a lot of her work coming out of this, being a woman in like making pictures and basically running into like all the old crusty photo dudes are like, rah, 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 rah. She's like, all right, fuck you. I can make a big picture. I can use a big camera. Like, I'm gonna do it with fucking dolls and shit. So kiss my ass. Here she is at work. I mean, I feel like if you're this successful, you could probably find some different things to stick under there to hold it up. But, I mean, it's nice to know that not just people like you and I are assembling our sets by taping a bunch of crap together. Here's some more. Color on this is super weird. The parts of this should be like a bright green, and or not, but whatever. Bright, very film noir in this vibe. Right? Like very like isolated psychological drama, the shadow, the light. Really quite good. So from these dolls exploring feminist ideas to Hans Belmer, who is, this is 1930s. Laurie Simmons is, she's like picture generation, maybe like, God, I don't know. She would kill me. Let's say 90s, right? That seems safe. I have no idea. If you want to know, look it up. Don't listen to me on dates. Hans Belmer, 30s, 40s, coming out of Nazi Germany into France, so like having to flee Nazi Germany, had been working doing, I don't know, industrial design or graphic design or something. Was into surrealism or was embraced by the surrealists, and the more you kind of look at him, the more you're like, right? Like a lot of stuff. So made these doll figures. They're sort of like younger teenage women that then their bodies get sort of like taken apart and reassembled in a way that is kind of disturbing. Was sort of, with the surrealism. So there's like, fetishy stuff, like sexuality stuff, like transgression or those ideas. But still couched within this very like patriarchal, misogynist framework, right? Again, like not every single surrealist is like an old patriarchy misogynist dude, but right, there was definitely a thread of that ran through all of this. Some of this is coming out of him being like, romantically obsessed with his cousin, like things where you're just like, yeah, I don't know. This is the first doll that is frankly significantly more creepy. And then the second one, which is maybe less sort of viscerally creepy in the sense that the materials themselves are more polished, but is perhaps more psychologically disturbing in the way that it is sort of like disassembled into these pieces and then reassembled, right? You can put the legs on any other part. This one has sort of like two pelvises, right? Like this one here, right? That's a leg, that's a leg. that's a leg or leg attachment point. So you have this like double vaginaed doll creature that's like been taken apart, like, and is there sort of with this furniture. Um, so composition is great. Idea of making this object is interesting. The way that he uses this object to explore psychological ideas is interesting, but creepy, 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 creepy. Don't like creepy. Um, Going into a very different realm of doll and sexuality that is rather, this is such a strange thing to say, rather more wholesome. So Amber Hawk Swanson, she did a project where she had a sex doll made of herself, right? She was 3D scanned, had this doll made. Or no, they 3D scanned her head. So they duplicated her head and then basically matched her proportions with like existing sex doll uh, blanks. I don't know. And so she had a sex doll made of herself that she then took to Vegas and they got married. And she like lived with this doll for a while and had this whole artistic practice involved with that. The idea of sort of like, how their bodies are changing, like from that point of like the initial, the doll sort of like quote unquote birth. Um, yeah, interesting work. Worth checking out. Not necessarily still life related, but just as a context for here's Amber and Amber Doll. Context for the rest of the work that I will show you. She then took the doll apart with like knives and saws and things, and made it into this model of Tilikum, a orca at SeaWorld that had killed several trainers. And again, this like ideas of sort of being trapped, ideas of like, the sort of the natural and the kind of societally ordered, like control of the body. One of the things I really like about this is like the really like kludgy nature of the sculpture that she's ended up with. I think that that's very cool. But this is sort of the still life bit that I was interested in. These are pieces of Amber Doll that were left over after the other work was made. And so she's photographing them in a very, right? And there's these moments like this, I'm like, I don't know what that is. That I'm like, holy fuck teeth. They're very kind of, there's like a scientific detachment in a way. The way that they're photographed is very like, high key light, white background, very sort of like presentation of evidence. But then what they are, right? We sort of like try to jigsaw them together in some way to understand their relationship to our idea of what the doll in toto would have been. They are a little sculptural. And then you have these sort of jarring moments where it's like, okay, well, that's definitely a finger. That, I don't know what that is. Best not to ask. So different people working with sort of objects in a symbolic way, right? We had a couple of people working with dolls in very, very different ways, using them as a means to explore their intellectual ideas.